President Putin has gone and said it, and now I'm going to say it, and this puts all of us in significant danger. Before we do that, I think we should look at what President Putin has to deal with, because we tend to look at this from Western eyes, and it is very different over there in Russia. I studied Russia in GCSE. I also studied it in the military as part of an electronic warfare program that I was doing for the Tornado Squadron and the wing that I was on up at Lossiemouth. I'm not going to go into any secret squirrel stuff, and anyway, it's quite historic. But look at the size of Russia in comparison to other countries. Twice as big as Canada, pretty much. Bigger than China, United States, Brazil. It's huge. Now, not only is Russia bigger than any other country in the world, but it also has the highest mineral wealth pretty much of everyone else apart from China and Vietnam. I mean, look at this. So we've got reserves of rare earth worldwide as of 2023. I mean, it's minerally very, very strong. It's a sort of thing that people might want to get their hands on. And if we look at it per GDP, so what is the output of the country? We can see America there, 25, what is that, $1 trillion? I think there's something crazy. Then you've got China, Japan, Germany, and United Kingdom batting well above its weight as we normally do. But look, Russia is down there. So relatively impoverished as a country, and also the GDP per capita, so the wealth per person, as you can see there, is $15,000. Not great. And when we look at the United States, $74,000. So there is a vast sort of, it's a large, poor country with huge mineral wealth. Let's just leave it there. We'll just leave it there for now. What Putin says in his video that we're going to watch in a second, guys, is that he's talking about the fact that precision munitions that are going to be fired into Russia and have been being fired into Russia for a very long period of time must be being programmed by NATO countries. This is a war, active war. It was an active war for a long period of time. Whatever you think about the Ukraine-Russian war, the annexing of Crimea back in 2014, whatever you think of the Poroshenko-Yanukovych election back in 2014 as well in Ukraine, whether that was CI sponsored or not, irrespective, it doesn't matter. And I'm not commenting on any of that kind of stuff, guys. You make your own views. He has a point. Now, I flew with Storm Shadow missiles. I'm going to give you a few little points in here that might help you understand what's going on without getting myself locked up in prison, because I am very careful about this. I'll be able to be locked up for freedom of speech more than anything else. But I will just lean a little bit into the narrative of the Ministry of Defense that I'm not a huge fan of. We will talk about what Putin's saying. And then we'll also, just before we hear Putin, we're going to listen to a guy called John Mearsheimer. And what I say here, this is John Anderson, Deputy PM of Australia in the past, speaking to John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer is from the Chicago University, I believe. He's a professor of international relations and politics. I'm only going to play about 30 seconds of what he says, and I'm of the view that pretty much Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs takes. I know not everyone else is, but I am of the view of, well, basically, what's America doing in Europe, full stop? Like, why have we got American bases all over Europe? We don't have any European bases in America. And so what Russia thinks is different from what we think. What Putin thinks is different than what, say, Biden thinks or Starmer or any European president or prime minister thinks. Okay, so we've got to look at things a little bit from Russia. And whenever we red team something in the military, we always looked at it from the enemy's point of view. It doesn't matter what we think is important, but it really, really does matter what the enemy thinks is important, because they're the ones that can be doing a lot of damage to us. And from Russia's point of view, having a buffer with Europe seems to be the thing that he really prefers. Now, whether you think, well, we're harmless, NATO is harmless, isn't it? He doesn't see it like that. And also, although it wasn't NATO that went into Iraq, Syria, all these other countries, in Afghanistan, everything else, he still sees it as NATO countries. I've been called a Putin apologist, but I'm a realist.
Maybe we've just become too smug and too slow to read real politics.
Well, I think that's exactly what happened here. I think you have to go back to the 1990s to understand what's going on in Ukraine. There was a big debate in the Clinton administration about whether to move NATO eastward, whether there would be NATO expansion or not.
Yes.
And inside the Clinton administration, there were a good number of people who were adamantly opposed to expanding NATO because they thought in realist terms. They believed that the Russians would see this as a threat. And as NATO got closer and closer to Russia's borders, it would all blow up in our face. And they fought tooth and nail to prevent it.
I think you can see, I'll put that link in the description there. John Mearsheimer, Jeffrey Sachs, and some other people are really interesting to listen to about why we've got to where we've got to. Now, let's have a look at the Ministry of Defence. If on Twitter you put Ministry of Defence unprovoked, you get a series of interesting tweets that are put out with exactly the same narrative. And what the ministry have said, and I always reply to this and say, they would say it was unprovoked. I say it wasn't unprovoked. It was entirely provoked. Now, we can say whether what Russia did was right, or we can say what Russia did was wrong, irrespective of that, with the Donbasses, the eastern regions, and the invasion and everything else. We're not talking about that, but we can still have a commentary on whether what happened was provoked or not provoked. And you have to go back and listen to some of Mearsheimer and listen to some of Sachs and just try and work it out for yourself. If you don't work it out for yourself, guys, someone's going to work it out for you. I'm not putting an agenda on this video, for example. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm not saying that. I have an opinion because I've just read so much about it, listened to podcasts, books, lectures, all this kind of stuff. I'm just saying do it yourself. Now, what the ministry will do, of course, it will say here that unprovoked full-scale invasion. So I'm just going to scroll down, see how many times the ministry mentions the word unprovoked. The illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is continuing. Illegal and unprovoked invasion. The unprovoked illegal assault on Ukraine is continuing. Unprovoked, unprovoked, unprovoked. And this guy here, Mark Curtis, who I don't know, said this is the 392nd time, I kid you not, the MOD has tweeted that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked. They're trying to convince you of something, is all I'm saying. Now, whether you believe it was unprovoked or not is irrespective, but you have to accept the fact that there's an agenda here somewhere. Let's have a look at what Putin says.
В последние дни мы видим и слышим, как на очень высоком уровне Великобритании и США муссируется тема о том, что киевский режим сможет наносить удар вглубь территории России западными вооружениями большой дальности. И, судя по всему, это решение либо вот-вот будет принято, либо, судя по всему, вообще уже принято. И эта вещь, конечно, экстраординарная. Хотел попросить прокомментировать то, что происходит.
Происходит попытка подмены понятий, потому что речь не идет о разрешении или запрете киевскому режиму наносить удары по российской территории. Он и так наносит с помощью беспилотных летательных аппаратов и другими средствами. Но когда речь идет об использовании высокоточного оружия большой дальности западного производства, это совершенно другая история. Дело в том, что я уже об этом говорил, и любые эксперты это подтвердят, и у нас, и на Западе, наносить удары современными высокоточными системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Это возможно только с использованием разведданных со спутников, которыми Украина не располагает. Это данные только со спутников или Евросоюза, либо на Соединенных Штатах, в общем, с натовских спутников. Это первое. Второе, и очень важное, может быть, ключевое, заключается в том, что полетные задания в эти ракетные системы могут, по сути, вносить только военнослужащие стран НАТО. Украинские военнослужащие делать этого не могут. И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
So with that in mind, guys, if you were Putin, what would you do if your country is being attacked with precision weaponry that is being programmed and guided by NATO serviceman, as he said, and I'm going to have to say it, unfortunately, having flown with Storm Shadow, without giving you too many details, he's not wrong. You're not going to let anyone program that missile. It's not a missile that you just fire and off it goes on a GPS coordinate. It needs intricate planning at a level that was outside of the squadrons. So the squadrons would have the missile, but it would have the target set within it. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not going to go any further than that because I don't need to, because Putin said it himself, okay? But he is right in saying that when these weapons are fired, and when these weapons are programmed, they're not programmed by Ukrainians. We're not just giving them weapons and off they go. We've got people obviously in country or not in country that are doing this, which means, of course, we're in conflict with Russia. I don't want to be in conflict with Russia. I don't want to be in conflict with the Russian people. All right. Now, repeatedly, Putin has said, look, we're happy to get in negotiations. Remember Boris Johnson going out to Ukraine and scuppering all that when he was working for some finance defense company out in New York City, whatever. So after he left being prime minister. So look, it's not as black and white as we see it. Now, hit the comments and tell me what you think. I mean, this is the weapon he's talking about. This is Storm Shadow. This is not a weapon that you just program into some coordinates. It's not like that. It's very detailed in the way that it attacks targets. I can't go into detail on it, of course, but I did fly with this weapon. Look, I'm going to leave it there because the video will be too long. I want to hear your comments on this because I'm not saying that you're not for Ukraine. We're all for Ukraine. We're all for working out what's going on with the territories in the eastern Donbass regions, the Russian-speaking people not being able to vote, whatever it might be. Everyone's for that. Of course we are. No one wants a war in Europe. Don't get me wrong. But are we saying that Mearsheimer, Sachs, everyone else is wrong with this? Are we saying that Putin's wrong here as well? Look at it from what maybe the West has interest in Russia. What's left? Iran, China. Well, Russia's one of those things that's on that list, isn't it? As was Syria, as was Iraq, as was Afghanistan. We all know this, guys, as would Libya. So all I'm saying is, should we open our eyes a little bit here? Hit the comments. Let me know what you think. Tim Davies, Fast Jet Performance.